In this presentation, I will be discussing Judaism. On the picture to the left, you can see a synagogue, and on the picture to the right, you can see a man in a classic prayer outfit that Jews often use. Okay, so here's an overview of Judaism. They have approximately 14.5 million followers. The Abrahamic Covenant is a really big part of Judaism. The canon that they use is the Tanakh, and it's made up of 24 books, and there's 3 sections, which is the law, the writings, and the prophets, and we'll go over that more later. The 2 most important holidays are Passover and Yom Kippur, and the 3 major divisions that we see in modern Judaism is Orthodox, Reform, and Conservative. They worship in a synagogue, which we saw in the previous slide. Their God is called Yahweh, and rabbis are the leaders of the synagogue and the leaders of the ceremony and the prayers. And in Orthodox Reform or Orthodox, they are the leaders of the community kind of. So here's the Abrahamic Covenant, and it's basically an agreement between God and Abraham that Abraham will be the founder of the nations of Israel, and it states that Yahweh is their only God and will be their God forever. And it reveals that Abraham's descendants will be slaves in Egypt for 400 years, which we actually see later in history. So this is a picture of the Tanakh. They read it opposite of what most people read books, in America obviously. And so the law is the Torah. Jews believe that the author is Moses, but there's a theory that there was actually 4 authors, and the initials are J, E, D, and P. The prophets are called Nebhim, and the writings are Ketubim or Hagiographa. And in the Tanakh, it's actually very interesting. There are 2 creation stories, and that's in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. And they kind of are different, but it's very interesting to see that there are 2 different creation stories in the Tanakh. So now we're going to talk about the 3 different branches in modern Judaism, and I have pictures next to each of them that kind of describes them. So this is Orthodox Judaism. It's very, very similar to ancient Judaism. And it basically is a collective term for the traditional branches of contemporary Judaism, and they observe the Torah extremely strictly. Mostly they live in their own communities, and their lives revolve around the Torah and the Tanakh, and they don't really involve themselves in secular life. So this is the conservative branch, and they're kind of an in-between between the Orthodox and the Reform. They're not super strict, but they still adhere to Jewish law more than the Reform branch does. So basically, it came around because they wanted to show that they were willing to embrace a secular society and education, because they recognize that there's more than just Judaism, that there is an education and jobs and everything, every part of that aspect of life. And they adhere to Jewish law, but also understand that there is more. So finally, this is the Reform branch. It's meant to be the most progressive branch, but it's very similar to conservative Judaism. There isn't a lot of differences. They believe that Jewish law is non-binding, and they embrace a lot of progressive values. And you'll see in this picture that it represents LGBTQ and Judaism, and how they support each other, and that's very, very common in Reform. They also have women rabbis, and they're just very progressive all around. So now we're going to talk about the 2 most important holidays in Judaism. So this is Passover, and it basically celebrates the deliverance of the Jewish people from Egypt after they had been slaves in Egypt. And it's called Passover because God passed over the houses of the Jewish people when he was slaying the firstborn of Egypt. And it's just a very like celebratory time for Jews because they were free finally. And they adhere to very strict dietary restrictions during this time, and it basically takes up 8 whole days, but most Jews only take the first and last day as full holidays. And then this is Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement. It's the most solemn day of the year. It's devoted to fasting, prayer, and repentance. And basically, it's a day set aside for self evaluation, and it's treated as a complete Sabbath. It's a day where they think about the sins that they might have committed that year and how they can start new again and how they can make this year better. And they wear white on this holiday because white symbolizes purity. So they're basically puring themselves. And even if they, the more progressive Jews don't celebrate other Jewish holidays, this is one that they probably most certainly would. And that is all.